Tobias Reed's finger hovered over the send button at 3:47 a.m., his entire body screaming for sleep. The dissertation chapter glowed on his laptop screen. 23 pages of academic brilliance that had cost him 4 nights, 6 energy drinks, and whatever remained of his sanity. His studio apartment was a war zone of scattered books, empty coffee cups, and the faint smell of desperation mixed with cheap ramen. He grabbed his phone with hands that trembled from exhaustion and too much caffeine, found Professor David Hamilton's contact, typed quickly, brain running on fumes. "Daddy, review the document I sent. Let me know your thoughts." Send. The relief was instant. The chapter was done. He could finally sleep. He set the phone on his nightstand, closed his eyes, and let out a long breath. 3 seconds of peace. Then his eyes snapped open. His heart didn't just stop, it crashed through his chest and shattered on the floor. "No!" The word came out strangled. He lunged for his phone, hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. The screen glared back at him, mocking him with that single catastrophic word, Daddy. Not David, not Professor Hamilton, not even a safe, distant Dr. Hamilton. Daddy. No, 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 no! Tobias frantically tapped the message, looking for the unsend option. Gone. Vanished. The universe had personally decided to destroy his life at 3:47 on a Tuesday morning. He stared at the screen, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass. 26 years old, 4 years into his PhD in English literature, 2 years as a graduate assistant to the most brilliant, most attractive, most completely off-limits professor in the entire university. Professor David Hamilton. God, even thinking his full name made Tobias' stomach flip. 34 years old, 6'2", with dark hair that perpetually looked like he'd just run his fingers through it, sharp gray eyes that could dissect a bad argument in seconds, and a collection of tailored suits that should be illegal in academic settings. He had this way of rolling up his sleeves when he was deep in thought, revealing forearms that Tobias had spent an embarrassing amount of time in not staring at. His office smelled like old books, leather, and some cologne that probably cost more than Tobias' monthly rent. Something woody and clean that made Tobias want to lean closer every single time they worked together. Every graduate student in the English department was half in love with him. The difference was that Tobias had spent 2 years perfecting the art of professional distance, never letting his gaze linger, never imagining what those long fingers might feel like wrapped around his wrist, never ever acknowledging the way his pulse jumped when David leaned over his shoulder to point at something on a manuscript, close enough that Tobias could feel the warmth radiating from his body. 2 years of perfect, agonizing self-control. Destroyed by autocorrect. His phone buzzed. The sound cut through the silent apartment like the gunshot. Tobias actually yelped, dropping the phone onto his mattress. It bounced once, twice, then lay there buzzing like an angry wasp. He stared at it, like it might explode. It buzzed again. And again. With trembling hands, he picked it up. David Hamilton. Interesting choice of address, Tobias. Oh God. Oh God, oh God, oh God. David Hamilton, I assume autocorrect has betrayed you at the worst possible moment? Or should I be genuinely concerned about the power dynamics in our professional relationship? Tobias wanted to die, actually cease to exist, evaporate into particles and scatter across the universe. His fingers flew across the keyboard, typing and deleting before finally settling on, oh my God, Professor Hamilton, I am so sorry. It was supposed to say David, just David. My phone autocorrected and I wasn't paying attention and I'm mortified. Please forget this ever happened. I'm actually dying right now. This is how I die. Death by humiliation at 3:48 a.m. 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. Each second felt like an hour. David Hamilton. Breathe, Tobias. I'm not going to have you expelled for a typo. Though I have to admit, it's the most entertaining message I've received at 4 a.m. in my entire academic career. I'll review your chapter later this morning. Try to get some sleep, and perhaps check your autocorrect settings before your next correspondence." Tobias buried his face in his pillow and let out a muffled scream that probably woke his neighbors. This was it. The end of everything. He'd have to transfer universities, change his name, move to a different country, maybe fake his own death. His phone buzzed one final time. David Hamilton. "For what it's worth, your panic is oddly endearing. Sleep well, Tobias." Tobias's heart did something complicated and acrobatic in its chest. He read the message 3 times, then 5, then lost count. Endearing. David Hamilton, Professor David Hamilton, had called his panic endearing. He didn't sleep at all. 7 hours later, Tobias stood outside David's office clutching 2 coffee cups like they were shields that might protect him from humiliation. He'd showered twice, changed his outfit 4 times, and seriously considered every possible escape route from the situation, including, but not limited to, calling in sick, faking a family emergency, actually causing a family emergency, or simply never showing up to campus again. But he was a professional, a grown man, a doctoral candidate who could face his mistakes with dignity and grace. He knocked on the door. "Come in." David's voice, deep, smooth, with that slight rasp that showed up when he was tired or particularly focused, sent electricity down Tobias's spine. It always had, though Tobias had become an expert at ignoring it. He pushed the door open. David sat behind his massive mahogany desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, wearing a charcoal gray sweater that hugged his shoulders in ways that violated several academic dress codes. He looked up, and the corner of his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but was definitely amused. "Tobias, right on time. I brought coffee." Tobias held up the cups with perhaps too much enthusiasm. "Your usual. Black, 2 shots of espresso because you're a psychopath who enjoys suffering." David's almost smile became a real one. Says the graduate student who survives on energy drinks and what I suspect is pure spite. That's different. I'm young. I can handle the abuse. You're 26. I'm 34. We're hardly in different generations. Though I appreciate you making me feel ancient. Tobias crossed the office and set the coffee on his desk, hyper aware of every movement, every breath. This close, he could smell that cologne again. Cedar and something crisp like winter air. It made his head swim. "About this morning," Tobias started, his voice cracking slightly. "Already forgotten." "Really?" David leaned back in his chair, studying him with those sharp gray eyes that always made Tobias feel like he was being read, analyzed, understood on a level that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Really, although I had to say, I've never seen you quite that flustered before." It was quite the performance. Very dramatic. Lots of capitalization and existential dread. He crawled up Tobias's neck and flooded his face. I was mortified. I noticed multiple messages within 30 seconds. Very emphatic apologies. You used the word dying at least 3 times. Can we please never speak of this again? Absolutely. David paused, setting down his coffee cup with deliberate slowness. His expression shifted into something Tobias couldn't quite read. Something sharp and curious and dangerous. Though I am genuinely curious about something. What? The word came out breathier than Tobias intended. Autocorrect learns from typing patterns. It predicts based on your most commonly used words and phrases. So either you frequently text about parental figures in your personal life, which seems unlikely given what I know about you, or... He let the sentence hang in the air between them. Tobias's mouth went dry. Or what? Or you use that particular word in other contexts. Contexts that would make your phone believe it's the more likely choice than my actual name. The office suddenly felt too small, too warm. The air thick enough to choke on. I don't know what you're implying.
Tobias said tearfully, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I'm not implying anything. I'm simply observing data patterns." David stood up, moving around his desk with that predatory grace he had, all controlled power wrapped in expensive knitwear. "You know what I find truly fascinating, Tobias?" "What?" Tobias couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but watch as David approached. "For 2 years, you've been impeccably professional. Perfect, even. Never a step out of line, never a lingering glance that lasted too long, never a single suggestion of anything inappropriate." David stopped in front of him, close enough that Tobias had to tilt his head back slightly to maintain eye contact. "It's almost like you've been very, very careful, like you've been working extremely hard to maintain certain boundaries." Tobias's pulse pounded in his ears. "I have been careful." "Why?" "Because you're my advisor. My advisor. There are rules. There are guidelines," David corrected, his voice dropping lower, softer. "Ethical considerations designed to protect vulnerable students from exploitation by faculty members in positions of power. But you're not a first-year undergraduate, Tobias. You're a doctoral candidate, an adult. And I'm not grading you anymore. You passed coursework 2 years ago. Your dissertation committee evaluates you now, and I'm simply one of 3 members. That's a technicality. Is it," David tilted his head slightly, "or is it an excuse? An excuse for what?" "For not admitting what we both know has been building between us for months, maybe longer." The words hung in the air like a confession and a challenge and a dangerous promise all at once. Tobias's mouth opened, closed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" David's gaze dropped briefly to Tobias's lips, then back up. "So you haven't noticed the way I watch you when you're concentrating on something? The way you bite your bottom lip when you're thinking through a complex argument? The way I find excuses to ask you to stay late in my office, even when the work could easily wait until morning?" Tobias couldn't breathe. "You're my advisor." "The way I specifically requested you as my graduate assistant for a second year when department policy suggests rotating assistants to give more students opportunities. The way I've memorized how you take your coffee, which books make you passionate enough to argue with me for hours, that you always wear that specific leather jacket when you were feeling insecure about your work. You notice what jacket I wear?" "Tobias." David's voice was rough now, raw. "I notice everything about you. I have been noticing everything about you for months, and it's been driving me slowly insane." The confession hit Tobias like a physical force, his back at the edge of David's desk. He gripped the wood behind him to keep his knees from giving out. "This is crazy," he whispered. "We can't what? Be attracted to each other? I think it's far too late for that. Act on it? That's a choice we can still make." "David, tell me I'm wrong." The words were a challenge. "Tell me you haven't thought about this, about us. Tell me that text this morning was purely autocorrect and not some part of your subconscious finally breaking through all those careful walls you've built." Tobias stared at him, at the intensity in those gray eyes, at the slight flush across David's cheekbones that suggested he wasn't as composed as he appeared. His mind raced through every interaction they'd had, seeing them all in a new light. The late nights in this office, talking about everything and nothing. The conference in Boston when David had taken him to dinner, and they talked for 4 hours. The way that David's hand would brush his shoulder when leaning over to look at his work. The looks that Tobias had convinced himself he was imagining. His voice failed him completely. "Because I've been thinking about it," David continued, his voice dropping to something intimate and devastating. "For months, every time you walk into this office, every time you challenge one of my theoretical frameworks in that sharp and brilliant way of yours, every time you stay late, and we end up talking about books and life and everything except the work we're supposed to be doing." "This is insane," Tobias managed. "You're my professor. I'm a man who is very attracted to another man," David interrupted. "Everything else is just context. Context that could destroy both our careers." "Yes. So why are we having this conversation?" David's hand came up slowly, giving Tobias every opportunity to pull away. His fingers brushed along Tobias's jaw, barely touching, but the contact sent shockwaves through his entire nervous system. Because that text this morning made me realize something. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of watching you walk out of this office every day and imagining what might happen if I ask you to stay. I'm tired of being professional when what I want is to be honest.
Tobias's hands clenched on the desk behind him. And what happens when you're honest? I tell you that you're brilliant and infuriating, and you make me want to throw every ethical guideline I've ever believed in out the window. David's thumb brushed across Tobias's cheekbone. I tell you that I've been half in love with you since that conference in Boston when you absolutely eviscerated that professor from Yale and then ordered the same pasta I did just so you could argue that your interpretation of its cultural significance was superior to mine. It was superior, Tobias said automatically, then processed the rest of the sentence. Wait, half in love? Maybe more than half, David admitted, but I need to know what you want, Tobias. Because if I'm reading this completely wrong, tell me now. Tell me. And we'll pretend this conversation never happened. We'll go back to being professional. I'll be your advisor, you'll be my assistant, and we'll never cross this line. And if you're not wrong, then we figure out what this is together. Tobias looked at him, really looked at him, at the vulnerability beneath the confidence, at the way David's hand trembled slightly against his face, at the hope and fear warring in those gray eyes. He'd spent 2 years being careful, being professional, denying what he felt every single day. What if he stopped? You want honesty? Tobias asked, his voice shaking. Please. I've had a crush on you since the first day I walked into your graduate seminar and you spent 2 hours destroying everyone's assumptions about postmodern literature. You were wearing that navy suit with a tie that matched your eyes, and you gestured with your hands when you got passionate about a point. And I thought I was going to die from how attractive you were. David's breath hitched. For 2 years, I have watched you and wanted you and convinced myself it could never happen. I've gone home after our late nights here and imagined what it would be like if you kissed me. I've reread your comments on my work like they're love letters. I have been so careful not to cross any lines because I was terrified of what I'd do if I let myself want you. And now, David's voice was rough, now I'm terrified for different reasons. Tell me. I'm scared that this is too good, that I'm going to want more than I should, that we'll cross this line and everything will fall apart and I'll lose not just my advisor, but the person who's become one of the most important people in my life. David's other hand came up to cup his face, holding him gently. What if it doesn't fall apart? What if we're careful and smart and we make this work? You can't promise that. No, David agreed, but I can promise that I'll try. That I'll protect your career and your reputation with everything I have, that if we do this, we do it right. Define right. At school, we're professional. Always. No one can know about this until after you've completed your dissertation and graduated. Your academic future comes first. No exceptions. If at any point this affects your work or your mental health, we talk about it honestly. If you want to stop, you tell me and we stop. No pressure, no guilt. And, David paused, and we give this a real chance. Not just sneaking around, not just attraction. We actually see if this thing between us is something that could last. Tobias's heart was doing gymnastics in his chest. Those are good rules. I've had time to think about them. How much time? Since Boston, 6 months of thinking through every possible scenario. Tobias couldn't help the smile that tugged at his lips. That's very academic of you. I'm nothing if not thorough. David's thumb traced his lower lip, and Tobias stopped breathing altogether. But I need you to be absolutely sure, Tobias, because once we cross this line, I don't know if I'll be able to go back. I don't want to risk what we have, this friendship, this working relationship, on something you might regret in the morning. Tobias reached up and wrapped his fingers around David's wrist, holding his hand in place.
I've been sure for 2 years, David. I just convinced myself it was impossible. And now I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this. He pulled David's hand away just enough to speak clearly. So if you're going to kiss me, stop overthinking it and just do it already. David's smile was absolutely devastating, demanding. You like it? I really do. And then David kissed him. The world stopped. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was 2 years of tension and wands and denial exploding into a single moment of contact. David's mouth was hot and demanding against his, one hand still cupping his jaw while the other slid to his waist, pulling him closer. Tobias gasped against his lips, and David took advantage, deepening the kiss until Tobias forgot his own name, forgot where they were, forgot every single reason this was supposed to be a bad idea. His hands fisted in David's sweater, cashmere his brain supplied uselessly, expensive cashmere, and pulled him even closer, eliminating every inch of space between them. David made a low sound in his throat, something between a groan and a growl that Tobias felt all the way down to his toes. They broke apart for air, both breathing hard. David's forehead rested against his, their noses touching. "We're in your office." Tobias's voice was wrecked. "I know. Anyone could walk in. I locked the door after you came in." Tobias pulled back to look at him. "You locked the door before we even started talking?" David had the grace to look slightly shamish. "I had a feeling this conversation might go in an unprofessional direction. Presumptuous. Prepared." Tobias laughed at the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep in his chest. "You're ridiculous. I'm beautiful." The words hit Tobias like a physical blow. David said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, like he was commenting on the weather. His hands were still on Tobias's waist, thumbs rubbing small circles through his shirt. "Take me home," Tobias said suddenly. David's eyes whitened. Now? Now, before I lose my nerve, before I start overthinking, before the universe decides to intervene again. He pulled him down for another kiss, shorter but no less intense. "Take me to your place. Let me see where you live. Let me exist with you somewhere that isn't this office or this campus or this professional dynamic. I have office hours and..." "Cancel them." "Tobias, cancel them, David, please." Something shifted in David's expression, the last of his hesitation crumbling. "Take your things." David's apartment was everything Tobias had imagined and nothing like he expected. 20 minutes from campus, third floor of a renovated industrial building. Exposed brick walls, hardwood floors that gleamed in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through massive windows. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves overflowing with volumes in multiple languages. A leather couch that looked soft and lived in. A record player in the corner. Vinyl records stacked beside it. Art on the walls. Actual art, not posters. Pieces that looked carefully chosen. Plants everywhere, thriving and green. It smelled like him, like that cologne and coffee and old books.
This is... Tobias turned in a slow circle, taking it all in.
Not what you expected?
I don't know what I expected. Something more sterile, more academic. I spent enough time in my office. David set his keys on a small table by the door, shrugged out of his jacket. Here, I get to just be myself. Tobias watched him move through the space, comfortable and relaxed in a way he never was on campus. His hair was slightly messed up from where Tobias had run his fingers through it in the car. They'd stopped at a red light and kissed like teenagers, unable to keep their hands off each other for the entire drive.
"Why?" David asked, already heading toward the kitchen.
"Are you trying to get me drunk?"
"I'm trying to calm your nerves. You look like you might bolt."
"I might," Tobias admitted. "This is surreal."
"Good surreal or bad surreal?"
"I haven't decided yet."
David returned with 2 glasses of red wine, handed one to Tobias. Their fingers brushed, and even that simple contact sent sparks up Tobias's arm. They migrated to the couch, sitting close enough that their thighs touched. "Okay," David said. Cards on the table. "What are you thinking?"
"That this is crazy."
"We've established that."
"That I can't believe this is actually happening."
"Also established." "That I fantasized about this moment more times than I can count. And now that it's here, I'm terrified I'll do something wrong." David set his wine glass down and turned to face him fully. "Tobias, look at me."
Tobias did. There's no wrong here. There's just us figuring this out together. David's hand found his, fingers interlacing. We can talk. We can drink wine and listen to music and pretend this is just two friends hanging out. Or, he leaned in slowly, we can stop pretending. Your choice. Tobias set down his own wine glass with shaking hands. I don't want to pretend anymore. The don't? This kiss was different from the others. Slower, deeper. Like David was savoring every second, memorizing the taste and feel of them. Tobias melted into it, his hands sliding up the tangle in David's hair. It was as soft as he'd imagined, thick and perfect between his fingers. David's hands roamed, learning the shape of him. Down his back, under his shirt, fingers tracing patterns on bare skin that made Tobias shiver and press closer. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, lips swollen, eyes dark. Bedroom? David murmured against his mouth. Yes. They stumbled down the hallway, unable to stop touching, unable to keep their mouths apart for more than a few seconds. Tobias's shirt disappeared somewhere between the living room and the bedroom. David's followed. By the time they reached the bed, they were both half undressed, skin flushed, hands desperate. David's bedroom was dominated by a massive bed with dark gray sheets, windows overlooking the city, low lighting from bedside lamps. Tobias had approximately 2 seconds to take it in before David was pushing him down onto the mattress, crawling over him. Still okay? David asked, his voice rough. More than okay. Tell me if anything isn't. I want you to feel good. I want this to be good. It already is, Tobias gasped, arching into the touch. God, David, you're killing me. Good. David's hands worked his belt open, sliding his jeans down his hips. Tobias kicked them off, suddenly very aware that he was almost completely naked in David Hamilton's bed, and David was looking at him like he was something precious and perfect. You're staring, Tobias said, breathless. I'm appreciating. There's a difference. Appreciate faster. David laughed low and warm. Impatient. 2 years, remember? I think I've been patient enough. Fair point. David stripped off the rest of his own clothes and Tobias's brain short-circuited. He'd imagined this, of course he had, but reality was so much better than fantasy. David was all lean muscle and long lines, moving with that controlled grace that made Tobias's mouth go dry. When David settled between his legs, the weight of them was perfect. Right. Like they'd been designed to fit together exactly this way. Tell me what you want, David murmured, his lips brushed Tobias's ear. You, all of you, everything. David's breath hitched. He reached for the nightstand and pulled out supplies, and Tobias watched through heavy-lidded eyes as he prepared them both. Every movement was deliberate, careful, checking in with touches and glances. Ready? David asked softly. Please. The first press-up David inside him was overwhelming, fullness and stretch, and pleasure sharp enough to make Tobias's back arch off the bed. David moved slowly, giving him time to adjust, pressing kisses to his face, his neck, his shoulders. Okay? David whispered. Move! God, please move! David did, pulling out and pushing back in with a controlled rhythm that had Tobias seeing stars. Every thrust hit something perfect inside him, sending waves of pleasure through his entire body. He wrapped his legs around David's waist, pulling him deeper, needing more. You feel incredible, David groaned against his neck. So perfect, so good. I could only make incoherent sounds, lost in the sensation. David's hand slipped between them, wrapping around him, stroking in time with his thrusts. The dual sensation was too much, not enough, everything all at once. David? His voice broke on the name. I know, I got you. Let go for me. But Tobias was already falling, his orgasm ripping through him like lightning. He cried out, his body clenching around David, pleasure overwhelming every sense. He distantly heard David curse and felt him shudder, and thrust once more before going rigid, gasping Tobias's name like a prayer. They stayed locked together for a long moment, both trembling, hearts racing, completely undone. David pulled out carefully and collapsed beside him, immediately pulling Tobias against him. Tobias went willingly, boneless and sated, tucking his face into David's shoulder. So, Tobias said after his brain started working again, that happened. That
definitely happened. Any regrets? None. You? Tobias propped himself up on one elbow and looked down at David's face. His hair was completely wrecked now, his lips red and swollen, and there were scratches on his shoulder from Tobias's nails. He never looked more beautiful. No regrets, Tobias said softly, but I'm scared. Of what? That this is too good, that I'm gonna want more than I should, that this ends badly and I lose you completely. David reached up, cupping his face. Then we'll be careful. We'll be smart. We'll follow our rules. And when you graduate, when there's no ethical concern left, we'll figure out what this really is without any barriers. You sound very confident. That's because I've never wanted anything the way I want this, the way I want you. We'll make it work, Tobias. I promise you that. Tobias let himself relax into David's embrace, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Tomorrow, they'd go back to being professor and graduate assistant. They'd maintain their boundaries and professionalism and all the careful rules it established. But tonight, in this quiet safety of David's bedroom, with the city lights painting patterns on the walls, they could just be Tobias and David, two people who had finally stopped fighting what they felt. Hey, David, Tobias murmured sleepily. For the record, you're way better than any autocorrect mistake. David laughed, shook them both. Best accidental text message I've ever received. I'm never living that down, am I? Absolutely not. I'm going to bring it up at your dissertation defense. Right there in front of the full committee. And now, let's discuss the time my graduate assistant called me daddy at 3:47 a.m. Tobias smacked his chest, laughing. Don't you dare. Then you better write a flawless dissertation. That's extortion. That's motivation. Tobias smiled against his skin, feeling David's fingers trace lazy patterns down his spine. This was crazy, complicated and messy and potentially disastrous, but as sleep began to pull him under, wrapped in David's arms with his heartbeat steady beneath his ear, he couldn't bring himself to care about any of it. Some mistakes, it turned out, were exactly what you needed, even if they started with a typo at 3:47 in the morning. The end.
Appreciate you watching. Hit subscribe, like, and share. See you in the next story.